Alright, Tony's work on this is great, but the coolest part of this entire project is this lick from JD.
A man, shield.
I mean, that's like the best thing on the entire album right there.
A man.
Tony Rice's break on Devil in Disguise from the Bluegrass Album Band Project Volume 3. I think it's track 1. This song has been kind of a white whale of a transcription project for a number of reasons. The first one being they're at like 260 beats a minute, which is, again, right on the edge of my tempo cap. And then there's a couple other things that make this kind of challenging, which we'll take a look at. They're in B flat, so I'm going to talk out of capo terms a lot. I've got my capo on the 3rd fret. Let's take a look at the song first to begin with. The break itself, the chord progression over it, it's just rocking between the 1 and a 4 chord. So between a G position, B flat, or a C position, E flat. And Tony handles this in a couple of different ways. We're going to slow it down to 70% so we can start looking at some of these things. He has a couple of main tricks, or a couple of main ways he goes and solos over this too, and they repeat themselves quite a bit. So let's slow it down. This is 70%. Let's see if we can start hearing some of those like kind of stock Tonyisms. Of stock Tony Rice vocabulary just kind of thrown in there too. I also think it's neat. One of the challenging things about transcribing this solo is his phrasing, and as we've seen it in some of the other songs that he does, he has a tendency to let his phrases bleed into each other. So there isn't necessarily a definite start and end to a phrase, so much as they like start overlapping, which is kind of difficult when you're trying to hear things in context. And so we've also looked at in some other songs how he handles the melody. To me, I think he takes a very liberal approach to it here. So that very first phrase, we'll just dive right in. That very first phrase, the way I hear the melody is just kind of something along those lines. Some target notes. You know, I definitely hear that B to D, that E to G, and kind of ending on that B note. And sometimes I like throw in a double stop. He does start off with one of those target notes with that D. He does land on some of those other notes, but he doesn't resolve them. So near as I can tell, this is what he's doing. So he kind of slides up on the A string to get that equivalent of the D open note. Okay, so that's his first phrase, okay, and it's going to bleed over a little bit. Okay, now in this opening phrase right there, there's 2 Tony Riceisms that are going to come out again throughout the rest of his solo. Okay, the first one is he does this pull-off thing quite a bit from the 1st fret to an open string, and then he lands on the 3rd fret of the lower adjacent string, and he does this a lot. Okay, so we're going to look at that some more throughout the solo, but that's Tony Riceism number 1. Okay, Tony Riceism number 1. That's the second one. Okay, so as he walks up, not chromatically, he does throw in some chromatic notes, but as he walks up, a lot of times he gets to that A, he skips the open B and goes straight to the C, and then we'll catch the B flat and slide back. Okay, so that's Tony Riceism number 2. So 1 is the, number 2 is the, that one right there. Okay, so he throws them into his opening phrase. He kind of follows the melody off the start. He ends on that G. That's where he resolves it, but he's not done there. He like resolves it and then he says, oh, by the way. Okay, so he's not content to just let it sit there. He's not content to cross pick over it or just play it as a double stop. Remember, I really want it to be, you know, and to me, to take up that space, I'm hitting that double stop a couple of times. That's what I do. Instead, he resolves it, but then resolves it again on the same note to kind of fill some space, which he doesn't really need to at this tempo. He could just rock out on quarter notes and no one would really complain about it with how fast it's going. Okay, so then he goes on. He doesn't stop there. He doesn't take a breath. He just keeps going. So he resolves that, then goes right into it. Two, kind of 1.752 phrase. Okay, again, here's what I want the first two phrases to be. To me, that's what the first two phrases are doing. The second phrase starts out, okay, instead he's coming from really high and going down low. Sound anything like what the melody is doing there, but that first thing, man, that is straight up Tony all the way, and you're going to hear that in so many different breaks, and you're going to hear so many guitar players utilizing that lick. One, because it's just so nice and concise. That right there, man, that can fit almost anywhere in any kind of a bluegrass song that has that bluesier feel. There's so much sass and attitude, and it's short, and it's tiny, and it just fits right into a tool bag really easily. Hey, there was Tony Riceism number 2 right there. Right? Walking up, skipping the open B, going to the C, sliding back from the B flat and resolving on the G. That's number 2. He doesn't do the pull-off here for number 1, but it is there kind of slightly in kind of an alteration over that C chord. So so it's an alteration of it. It's not the, but the main idea is still there. Okay, so that D sharp or that E flat's still there. Instead of going down to go to the C, he goes up, like kind of an appoggiatura, kind of like a D sharp to E instead of a E flat to D right there. Okay, so an approximation of number 1 is there, and then number 2 is also there. So that's the culmination of the second phrase. He does take a slight pause here. It's about a beat and a half worth before he sets up this next section. This next section has been kicking my butt for the past couple weeks. It's that triplet section. It's tough, especially at 260 beats a minute, to make it all sound clean. I end up, it just kind of starts to happen where you kind of start glossing over it, or maybe the pull-off isn't as strong. If you slow down it, and I'm using that transcribe software, and I'm listening to it, and every single one of those notes is crisp and clear when you listen to the slowdown thing. So it's just kind of a testament to his chops and what he can handle. So let's look at those triplets. So there's a set of 5 triplets. 2 of them are the same, and then they go on. Okay, so the triplets themselves are, I'm talking capo terms, are B flat, A, G, B flat, A, G. So he does that twice. Then he does E flat, D, C, right? That was like Tonyism number 1, right? Okay, so B flat, A, G, B flat, A, G, E flat, D, C. Then he changes the finger pattern and goes A, G, F natural. And then he changes the finger pattern again and goes D flat, C, B flat. Okay, so those are the 5 triplets. Those right there. Okay, the way my pick is working, and what I assume he's doing too, is on those pull-offs are all a downstroke, and then I catch the lower adjacent string on an upstroke. So I go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, and that's how my picking works out. And then it's straight alternate picking, and I don't have to worry about it like the machine's going on. Okay, don't have to think about it. He does set it up with another one of those B flat A G moves, Tony Riceism number 1. He sets it up, but it's not a triplet, it's just straight 8th notes. Okay, so he sets it up, that first triplet with straight 8th notes, and then does the triplets. something similar to that. Okay, so again, there it's a tough lick. And like I said, that's been my white whale to kind of get through. So those triplets are fun. I definitely encourage everyone to like just take some time to work through them because they're so satisfying when you get them right, but so frustrating when you're this close and it just doesn't work out. That sets up the third phrase. So he does those triplets, and again, like I'm feeling the melody on. Not exactly what he does. He does work his way up, but I like how he breaks the monotony of, you know, kind of the way the phrasing works. So we looked in Blue Ridge Cabin Home how he really likes to use that pull off there as a space filler. He does it 4 times in Blue Ridge Cabin Home, and here he does it twice, where I feel like he could just do it once. But again, that's Tony Riceism number 1. And then he does the same thing on the C chord. He just threw in both of them right there, which I mean was almost kind of in that first phrase. There's another one that's going to get a lot of mileage from a lot of players. Very bluesy. All he's doing is it's a double stop. I'm laying my 3rd finger on the 5th fret of the B and G string, then doing the same thing on the 3rd fret of the same 2 strings. So 5, 3, and then I'm hammering on with my 2nd finger on the 4th fret. Okay. So Tony Rice licks, Tony Riceisms, the powerful ones are that pull off from the 1st fret down to open string, then to the adjacent lower string's 3rd fret. That's Tony Riceism number 1. Number 2, he walks up, skips the open B, hits that C, and slides back. Uses that a lot. That's Tony Riceism number 2. Then this little nugget of a Tony Rice lick. Get a lot of mileage, very bluesy. It makes its way in a lot of different solos. And then that last one is that, again, you can get a lot of mileage out of these. Okay, so I like to think of those Tony Riceisms like number 1 and 2, what I was talking about. Those are more like ways of navigating over those chord changes. They aren't necessarily straight stock licks, but he employs them with a lot of repetition, and he plays around with the rhythm with it quite a bit over a lot of his solos and other songs. And then the last 2 we were talking about, those are both just straight licks that you can fit in your tool bag, take it anywhere. So we're going to listen one more time at 70%, see now how our ears are kind of drawn towards these kind of Tony Riceisms. And yeah, we'll see if we can, you know, apply it to other songs too later.